Hey everyone, Dan Johnston here. I'm the Jack of all Ministries, here to help you make it happen. And today's video is all about acoustic panels. So if you want to hear about that, stick around. There's a couple things I want to accomplish in this video. So first, I had some acoustic panel samples sent to me from a company that asked me to do an honest review. So I'm going to do that, but in addition to that, I'm going to compare those panels to these old acoustic panels that I had that served me in my studio for a couple of months, and then I'm going to compare those to what I have in there now for acoustic treatment. And I'm going to explain the difference between the two, why you might choose acoustic foam versus what I have in there now and vice versa. And in addition to that, I also want to explain what the purpose of these actually is, because I think a lot of people buy these acoustic panels thinking they're going to do one thing for them, and they don't do that. And that's not necessarily the panel's fault, because sometimes we buy these thinking they're going to do something for us, and they weren't designed to do that. And then, of course, at the end of this, I also want to talk about installation, because these can be a little bit tricky to install. You wouldn't think that just a little bit of foam would give you any hassles, but it actually can if you don't do it right. So I'm going to talk a little bit about that as well, and hopefully you'll find this video helpful if you're looking at some foam acoustic panels to treat a studio or a talking space or whatever it is that you'll be using it for. So first things first, we will unbox the panels that I got here. So as I'm first looking at these, what I notice right away is you'll see this is pretty flat, right? They come shrink wrapped, put in a vacuum seal thing. These are 1 to 2 inch panels, and as you can see right here, this is not 1 to 2 inches. I mean, they're compressed pretty tight, which is actually a common way if you're going to have these shipped to you that it would be done, because if they're made out of foam, why not smash them down? And so what you're supposed to do is take them out of the packaging and leave them out for 24 to 72 hours to let them expand. Now, when I bought these, what it actually said to do to speed up the process is it says to get them a little bit wet and then stick them in the dryer, and it'll actually speed up the expansion process. However, the difference here is that these are actually adhesive backed, so you can see right there on the packaging. They're adhesive backed, so I think that might be a reason why they don't tell you to put it in the dryer. When I let these expand, I had a couple of panels that didn't expand all the way. There was a couple of divots and stuff that just never came out. So you can see here that this edge never actually fully popped up. I'm not sure how to get light. Yeah, there we go. See? So there were weird dents in these. Now that was a completely different company than these, I believe. So, I can't say that that's what's going to happen here. But knowing that that's a possibility, it was a good idea for me on these to buy about 10% more than I needed, which wasn't a big deal because they're pretty cheap, but I felt like it was right to buy an extra 10% just to make sure that I had a couple left over. All right, let's go ahead and cut these open using my razor knife, the one that's not retractable, because I like to live on the edge, but not too close to the edge. It'll cut you. All right. I think there's multiple panels in there. Ooh, did you hear that air escape? Vacuum sealed. Okay. So you can see these are actually expanding pretty quick. And actually the email that I got from the company said that they have an ultra fast expansion formula or something like that. So, but it does seem like they're blowing up pretty quickly. And as I take out a stack here, you can see, because of the way that they're shaped, they can actually put them together and they fit nicely. So yeah, but here they are. Boy, I have to say, they were really generous. I mean, they gave me a lot of these, so I can do some cool stuff with that. I may actually take these to church when I'm done and use them on our stage in the fellowship hall, because it would be great to have some acoustic treatment in there. Okay, so first impressions. What am I seeing here? So far, I really like what I see, and this is really impressive. So the email that I got said that they have an ultra-fast expanding foam, which I thought was just some junk that you put in to talk about your product, right? But that actually seems to be legitimate, because when I took these old panels out of their packaging, and it told me that I needed to wet them. I didn't need to, but it said if you want to speed up the expansion process, you soak them and then you dry them, and that speeds up the process. So I did that. And even after, I think it told me to do that for 24 to 48 hours, something like that. And I actually put them through the dryer multiple times. And it still took a couple of weeks for them to fully expand. Like, it was a really slow process for these. This seems to be 100% brought out. I really think it's done expanding. I could be wrong. I'm still going to give it the 24 hours. But I really think, like, wow, maybe that like ultra fast expansion is legitimate. I would feel confident in installing these right now, and I just opened them 10 minutes ago. As far as like density goes, I think they're pretty close. This feels slightly more dense to me, but it's also hard to tell because it is a different shape. But honestly, I don't think that's a huge concern either way. We'll find out when we do testing, acoustic testing. So yeah, so far, first impression is that these are really good. So the next thing I want to do is I want to test these panels against each other, okay? Now you might notice that I started this video in the laundry room in my basement, and you might be thinking, why would you film in the laundry room when you have a studio? Well, there's actually a good reason for that. So as I test this, right, what I don't want to do is completely retreat my entire studio in order to test how good these panels are. So what I did was I came up with a location that has basically two things going for it, okay? So the first thing is I need a small space so that it takes less acoustic treatment to actually have an effect, number one. Number two, I want a space that needs a lot of treatment. So basically that means that the room has to have a lot of reverb, a lot of hard surfaces that are reflective. And for me, the best place to do that could be a laundry room, but actually I want to do the testing in the room right next to it, which is my basement bathroom. That's where I want to do my testing. Honestly, I think that's the best way to go. Less surface area, more reflections, it's perfect. Before I hop into the actual test though, what I want to do is I want to explain exactly what I'm trying to figure out by explaining what acoustic panels are for and also what they are not for. So before we hop into the test, I want to explain what exactly it is that I'm testing for. So since I started the Jack of All Ministries channel and I've done all these acoustic explanations, I've had a lot of people send me emails asking me, hey, I was looking on Amazon and I found these panels. Is this going to help me soundproof my room because my neighbors are really loud? And I have to write back an email saying, no, these panels are not going to help you with that, okay? Because there's a huge difference between soundproofing and sound treatment, okay? Or dampening and control, or there's various other words that people use. So the truth is, some people think that if you put a bunch of these on your wall, that now people in the next room aren't going to be able to hear you. These are not meant to block sound, okay? Things that block sound are things that have a lot of mass in them, right? So we're talking brick and concrete and wood and stuff like that, okay? That's the stuff that's going to block sound from going from one place to another. This treats sound. It controls sound within a room. That's what these are designed to do, okay? Now, you might put a bunch of these on your wall and notice that it's a little bit quieter in the next room. Yeah, there's going to be an effect, but it's not going to be a complete sound dampening solution, okay? This is meant to control sound. So what happens is when sound is bouncing around in a room, it'll hit a hard surface and reflect and bounce off, okay? And that creates something called an echo or reverb. I've made a couple of videos about that, explaining what acoustic treatment is, and I'll go ahead and link cards up here, to give you an idea of the difference between soundproofing and also sound treatment, if you want to check those out later. Or what I'll do now is I'm just going to take a couple of clips from that video and put them in here so that I can explain it just real quickly. So here's Ancient Past Dan.
So if you have this and it's making sound, right? These sounds are coming out of the speaker towards the listener. The first sound they're going to hear is the most direct one, right? A straight line is the shortest, way to get between 2 points. So that's what you're going to hear first. But the problem is speakers don't shoot sound in only one direction. See, sound is going to go off in many different directions. Now, what happens though is when it hits a wall, the sound may bounce back, okay? So what we run into is that while this might be, maybe this is like a 5-foot distance, this bounce to coming to your ear might be something more like a 7-foot distance. And then this might be something more like a 12-foot distance. Now, sound moves at a fixed rate. It's like 700 something miles an hour. I'm not exactly sure. But what happens is it's going to take longer for this one to get to you than this one is going to take to get to you. And so what that does is you're hearing a scattered set of reflections. Now, what that sounds like to the human ear often is reverb. The sound kind of blurs out because you're hearing the reflections later than you're hearing the initial sound. Now, sometimes this bouncing might take a really long time. Like if you're in a cave, a sound might go a really long distance without any reflections and then hit a wall and come back. So there might be a long gap in time where you don't hear a reflection and then suddenly you hear one. We hear that as an echo, right? A delay. But basically it's the same principle, because the next thing I want to talk about is absorption. This is how we stop this process from happening. If you imagine for a second that sound is like a tennis ball, and I threw it in this room and it hit the wall and it bounced off, okay? That's a reflection. But if we put, say, like a pillow, and I threw that tennis ball at the pillow, it's going to lose its energy and it's going to fall to the floor before it bounces back. Okay, so it's kind of the same principle we use when we try to stop sound in a room from bouncing around. We want it to sound good. Okay, so these absorbent materials like the studio foam or sound panels or something like that, that's what we use them for, is to stop that bouncing of the sound. That's why we use absorbent materials.
Okay, so you can quickly see how something like this would be great if you're trying to put together like a vocal booth or a recording studio, or you just want to make videos and edit things. In that case, you want to be in a room that's controlled. You wouldn't want to be in a room like this. The only reason I'm in a room like this for this video is because I want a space where I can treat it, right? And so that's what we're going to be testing for. So we're going to be looking at 3 different types of panels, and we're going to measure exactly how well they do. So what I'm going to be testing for is something called RT60, okay? Now RT60 is a measurement that tells you how long it takes for a sound to drop by 60 decibels. So if a sound is bouncing in a room, okay, if I say hello and it hits a wall, hello, 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 and it bounces around and there's this delayed effect where all these reflections are going into my ears at a delay, the question is, how long does it take for those repeated sounds to quiet 60 degrees? Okay, that's how we measure reverb, or to a different extent, echo. We're going to measure that. I'm going to check the RT60 in this bathroom by itself. Then I'm going to check the RT60 with my old acoustic panels. Then I'm going to check it with these new acoustic panels. And then I also have an acoustic panel that I'm going to be taking out of my studio and putting it in the bathroom as well. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to check the amount of square footage that I can get covered by whichever one of those things I have the least of. I think it's my old one of these, but I have quite a few. So I'm going to check the square footage of coverage that I get from these panels, match the square footage coverage with these panels, and then I'm also going to do the same thing with the bigger panels that I have in my studio. Now, those panels are a much different panel, so I don't expect the results to be the same, but after the test, I'll explain to you when you might choose one of these over the other. Now, the bathroom is about 40 square feet, and what they say is kind of a rule of thumb is that you want about 40% coverage based on your square footage, and that's assuming you have 8-foot ceilings. Now, that's not a perfect way to go. It's a simplified version to figure out what you need. Every room is different. Every application is different. Typically they say office environments need 15 to 20%. If you're putting together a more professional environment where there's going to be speaking or something like that, they say never go below 25, but you really want to be in that 40% category. So that means for this bathroom, we're looking to cover it with about 16 square feet worth of panels, and that's perfect because my old acoustic panels, I have exactly 16 of them left, which is 16 square feet. However, there is something to consider. So when it comes to treating a room, in reality, square footage is key, surface area is key. And so if you look at these acoustic panels, you can see here that the actual surface area of this is more than just 1 by 1, because on the side of the panel you have surface area, and then because this is cut into angles, every one of these angles increases the surface area by another inch. Any acoustic panel you get is going to have more surface area than just being flat, unless it is flat. So that's something to consider as well. You get extra benefit there. Another thing is when you're using a panel like this, it's actually good to put a slight gap behind it. So if you can actually install these in a way to where if you have your wall and you have like a 1-inch gap behind it, that's actually better for your acoustic absorption. It gives it a chance to not only catch your sound that's coming at it this way and absorbs it. But also when the sound comes and hits the wall and reflects back, it gets picked up on the back side as well. Now, obviously, this has the adhesive backing, so it wasn't meant to be, or it's meant to be put on the wall. But that's just something to consider when you're treating a room. If you can get it off the wall by an inch or so, then you're really helping yourself out. And one more thing to consider when you're putting stuff like this in your room is a lot of times we just think about the walls. But when you're in a space, there's actually 6 surfaces in a cubic room that you need to worry about, right? You have all 4 walls, but you also have the floor and the ceiling. Sound reflects off of any surface. It doesn't care if it's a wall or the floor, right? So technically when you're treating a room, it helps to put rugs in the room to help prevent reflections on the floor, and it also helps to put treatment on the ceiling, which again prevents reflections from the ceiling, right? And so balancing things in the room is a good idea. And actually, when you're measuring a room, you can actually move that mic around in different areas to find out where your different hotspots are and stuff like that. Now, I'm not going to get that in depth into it because we're testing this and we're not trying to figure out the best way to treat my bathroom. We're trying to figure out how these compare against each other. So as long as they're arranged in a very similar, almost exact same way to each other in the room, then I'm convinced that we'll get good enough results to be able to tell which one performs better. So that's kind of the goal in accomplishing this test. So let's go ahead and hop to it. Now before I get into the test results, let's look at the test that I actually did to figure out how well these panels perform. So basically I'm going to be testing for that RT60 number that I mentioned before, and I'll be using a software called REW, or Room EQ Wizard. It's a free software, very easy to use. There's a million tutorials online if you want to do something similar. But basically the way it works is it's going to play a sound from my studio monitor, and I'm just using one monitor and I'm not using the subwoofer or anything because treatment like this is not going to do anything in the lower frequencies. So I'm just using one studio monitor and it plays a sweeping sound. So it sounds something like, and what it does is as it's playing from that speaker, there's also a microphone in the room, and what that microphone does is it picks up what you can hear in the room. Now the software knows that the speaker is only playing that frequency for a split second, right? So then the microphone is saying, but here's how long it keeps playing in the room, okay? So you can imagine that what it's doing is the speaker is saying, here's 1 split second of a frequency, but it takes this much time for it to actually go away. And the reason it takes that much time for it to go away is because it's bouncing around in the room. So that's why this is a good test to measure the reverb in a room, okay? And so basically, at the end of this, we're going to look at a graph which is going to explain how long it took for each frequency to drop 60 decibels. Now, when I did this test, I started off by just measuring the empty room because I want to know what are we working with to begin with. Then I tested the old panels that I bought a while ago to see how they performed. Then the new panels that were sent to me. And finally the big boys, which are basically the ones that are behind me here that I use actually in my studio now. Alright, so now that the testing is done, I'm going to look at this graph which is going to show us the RT60 number. So now again what RT60 is you'll hear that sweep, right, that plays it through the speaker. And the microphone picks up how long it takes for that frequency to go away. Now the reason that it would go longer than what the speaker is playing is because it's bouncing on all the walls. And so the longer it takes for a sound wave to bounce off walls and come back, the longer the reverb time goes, right? And so if you are putting, say, acoustic panels in a room to stop that bouncing from happening, well then the RT60 time should be shorter, okay? So looking here at this graph, you can see that it measures, this is the frequency, and I have it plotted from about 200 hertz all the way up to 10,000 hertz, which gives us a pretty solid range. And then you can see that it's measured here in milliseconds, all right? So at the top of this graph, that means it would take a full second for that sound frequency to drop 60 decibels, okay? So that's what we're going to be checking out here in the graph. So first, let's look at what the room looks like empty. So the bathroom by itself, you can see that, say for example, this frequency at 630 hertz, it took 850 almost milliseconds for that frequency to drop 60 seconds. So that particular frequency bounced around for quite a while, almost a full second, really. Once we get, to above about, 1,000 hertz, These all have a much shorter decay time, and that's because higher pitch frequencies are easier to stop, right? They just don't, they're thinner, if you will, and it's harder for them to continue their energy in the room. So this is what the room looks like empty. And what we really want to do when we treat it acoustically is to get this line to kind of flatten out and hang out here. We don't want it to go all the way down, because the room in that case would feel unnatural. It would feel really weird to just not have any play in the room at all. So you can see here that really this is the area where we would want to do most of our work to try to flatten this out. The old panels, the ones that I had in my studio before, here's what they did when I tested them. So you can see the high pitch frequencies were controlled fairly easily, and they're pretty flat now, right? So that's really good. But you can really see the work that was done in the, beginning here at 250 hertz up to, about the 1.25 K hertz region. So most of this got flattened out. So let's take a look at the new panels. When we tested those, you can see that they actually even did better. The reason I think that actually happened is because these acoustic panels are quite a bit softer than the other ones, and there's more surface area. Really, I think it's pretty clear that they performed in a pretty similar way. But what I want to bring up next is these are the ones I'm calling my big boys, the ones that I actually use in my studio right now. And you can see here that this is actually a very interesting thing. So let me get rid of the empty one here and just compare the new panels. Now you can see that my big boys actually do even better at reducing the RT60 times in the lower frequencies, the 300 plus. But you can see that they actually don't perform as well as those acoustic panels once you get above 1.5K. All of this, it's actually higher. Now the reason that's probably happening is because those panels, even though they're bigger, right, and they're using, they're still soft, the actual material that I put on the outside of that is actually fairly stiff. It's like an outdoor upholstery, so there's actually even a waxy coating on it that makes it feel kind of stiff to the touch. So those panels in that room actually reflect a little bit, not really reflect, but they don't dampen as much as the very soft acoustic panels do. So they perform better in these kind of more, mid-rangey frequencies, and they don't perform as well in the higher end frequencies, but that's not a problem for me because you can see here that this is actually a flatter line in general. But anyway, that should tell us a couple of things here, that basically these panels that I got sent to me are doing their job, and I think that's one of the most important things to consider. So one of the things about this is not the cheapest, acoustic foam that you're going to find on the internet, but this is. I searched a long time to try to find the cheapest ones that weren't just this pattern, and this was the best I could do. Now, like I said, some of the panels I got here, you can see how there's just kind of these bite marks in it. Those just never expanded, and it's just some sort of a manufacturing defect. So that's why I recommended ordering about 10% more. With these, I didn't find a single one with a flaw. And so these might be a little cheaper, but there's two things about that, okay? So this is cheaper, but you might have to order 10% more, which, kind of offsets the cost. And then the other thing is that this also comes with the adhesive backing on it. Now, the nice thing about the adhesive backing is installation. Now, there's a couple ways you can install these. I tried to install these at first in my studio with double-sided tape, but the problem is that they just kept falling off. You're sticking it to foam, so it's not like a solid surface where you're getting a bunch of surface contact with the adhesive. So these just kept falling off the wall. Now, a lot of that might have been because, I said when I pulled these out, I soaked them and then ran them through the dryer. And there may have still been some moisture on the inside, so that may have had something to do with it. But I had so many fall off the wall that I needed something that was actually more of an actual physical way to mount these. And I'll show you how I did it, and then I'll show you why I think I like this better. So I like using these. It's just a brad nail that I broke off, right? It's super thin, and it's not going to leave any major size holes in your wall. Okay, so I'm just going to show you this. This room is actually under renovation right now, so this is just fresh drywall. Because I actually plan on using those panels at my church, but I'm on vacation, so I don't want to go there right now. But I'm going to stick it up here, and then I'm also going to install on here. And you can see with drywall, these go in with very little effort, right? And it's nice because it makes just a tiny pinhole. I mean, that's what, maybe at the widest point, a 1/16 of an inch maybe. And then you just get your panel, put it where you want it, just press it on there, and it's going to stay. This is obviously wobbly because it's only one, but if you put two in there, it'll keep it stationary. And that was basically the way that I mounted these on my wall. I put them in, you know, 2 to 4 places on there. It held it up just fine. But the problem with that is it's not sticking all the way on, right? I mean, you can see there's still some play in there. The other thing is these are beefy enough to where they want to hang flat, but this shape is a lot more flimsy because it gets to a very thin point there, and these can actually bend a little bit. So that's why it's nice that these ones come with adhesive, which is great because you just peel off the back, find where you want to put it, stick it up there, press it on. So sticking these to the wall is pretty great because if you want to use them on a rounded surface, you know, they can contour with the wall and kind of go where they need to go. And you know, you can stick them and re-stick them. This is probably the 6th, 7th time I've stuck them up there, and it's, you know, pretty solid. I mean, if I'm pushing down on the top, it's not going anywhere. You know, you got to really dig to slide it down the wall. So it's, you know, this is a solid way to treat a room. Okay, so big picture at the end of the video. Okay, how do I feel about these particular panels? Would I buy them myself? Yes. Now granted, these were being sent to me as part of a deal for me to do a review, and I did get free panels out of it. Okay, that's pretty great. So just looking at my honest opinion of these panels, would I buy them personally, even if they weren't sent to me for free? Yes, I would, and here's why. They're not the cheapest panels, right? You can get them cheaper, but there are 2 things about these panels in particular that I really like. Number one, there's an adhesive backing, okay? If you're gonna spend 80, 90 cents a square foot with no adhesive backing, I would rather spend another 30, 40 cents per square foot and get the adhesive backing. To me, it's worth it, right? Because I like the way it sticks on the wall, very easy to use, and you can always add nails for extra support, but this is gonna get its fundamental support. It's gonna stick cleanly on the wall. There's no dangling or shifting around or gaps or anything like that, right? Number one. Number two, I was really impressed with the expansion of these panels. They opened up in just a couple of minutes when my other panels, you know, it took me not only a while, right, days for them to fully open, but some of them didn't open completely. This, I had no issues. I could have put these up right away. So I'm impressed with the expansion rate of these. So for those 2 reasons, I would spend $1.20, I think is what it is, a square foot on these panels. I think it's completely worth it in my opinion. Now here's the other thing. In my studio, because it's a musical space, right, I mentioned before that my big boys, they handle some of those like mid-range frequencies a little bit better, okay? However, they don't do as well on the higher frequencies as we saw in the results. Now for me personally, I want both. I want both of those things in my studio. So I do have my big boys up on the wall, but I also have carpet on the floor, right? I have foam panels actually built into my ACDAs at the front so that they absorb some of the higher pitch frequencies. I have more of like a wool-based panel that's wrapped around the soffit above my recording desk. I even have some felt locked in behind the wooden slats on my side walls. So I am also using some very soft materials in order to pick up the higher pitch frequencies to, you know, attenuate those and bring the RT60 down a little bit. So these are something that I would totally use. Matter of fact, I plan on actually using these at church. We have a fellowship hall where we do some events on the side sometimes. There's a stage up there, which the side walls are just painted drywall. I'm gonna put these up there to help get rid of some of those frequencies because I think they're fantastic, right? So when you're working in a space, you have to take a holistic approach, especially if it's a musical space. What if it's not a musical space? What if you're just worried about speaking? Well, 9 times out of 10, this is going to be enough for you. If you're just going to record your talking in a closet or in a small room or something like that, covering the walls with this and part of the mic path with this, like putting these on the wall behind your microphone or something like that, it's going to do a lot. It's going to help you out a lot. It's going to do a lot. So I think that these are completely worth the cost. I have really nothing negative to say about them, to be honest with you. I mean, what is the worst thing I can say? It's foam that's cut in a great shape. It's very inexpensive, and it has the easiest mounting, you know, technology that I've been able to find. So I have nothing bad to say about these. These are not going to be an all-encompassing solution for most situations, but for what they're meant to do, I think they do a great job. So again, don't buy these if you're trying to soundproof your room. Don't buy these if you think this is going to completely make any room into a great studio space. These are going to do nothing for low-end frequencies, right? But for what they're meant to do in the higher range, they do a great job. So I honestly highly recommend them. Well, that's going to do it for this video, guys. Hopefully you found it helpful and informative, and if you did, I'd appreciate it if you consider subscribing to my channel and liking this video, because this is the type of stuff that I love to tackle. And with that, hope you have a great day. I'll see you on the next video.